to this conference. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make it to Australia. I was really looking forward to it, but I had some passport delays. So starting with the show, leveraging an African-centered LLM for dismantling white supremacy, the case of Smoky. Right now, I'm currently in San Diego, California, with my uncle, retired attorney. His name is Roy Gunner, and his older brother, we affectionately called Uncle Smoky, Lionel Gunner. So, in conceiving this system, I had already thought of the name Smoky, but we wanted to reference my uncle who passed in 2015 and naming this system after him. So here's what we'll cover from the paper. First, we'll go through a brief introduction of the scholars who I've determined are best suited to tackle this subject of white supremacy. And then we'll talk about the system that I've designed to eradicate white supremacy, known as planetary chess. Uh, and we'll talk about the place of Smoky within this planetary chess system. Next, after that, we'll go on to the discussion section and start talking about tackling some of these complex issues that we're seeing globally in the rise of white supremacy. And for the conclusion, we'll talk about the winning formula. So if you notice the artwork from from the slides, they're all artwork that I've pioneered, an art form that I've pioneered called Su-racialism from Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu is a central figure in the planetary chess system. As a master scholar of war, people of color, we see, according to our scholars, we see systemic racism as a form of war. So we want to study from one of the foremost scholars in that area, which is Sun Tzu. So all the artwork that you see will represent his theory, which was that if you know yourself and know the enemy, then you can win any type of war. So Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, in my opinion, if you're going to talk about white supremacy, she is one of the foremost scholars that you should acknowledge and look at her contributions to the field. She presents her theory, which was known as the Cress theory of color confrontation, which explores the psychological underpinnings of racism and white supremacy. She also coined the term planetary chess. And breaking down that term, planetary chess, what she's generally saying is that systemic racism or the fight against white supremacy is an extended chess game, and the victims of systemic racism, the only reason that continue to be victims is they simply don't have the knowledge of the game, how to play the game. And so this form of resistance to white supremacy might be coined as, it should be coined as counter racism. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, counter racism as opposed to anti-racism. So Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is one of the central figures of this system, planetary chess. And you can see in the background, this picture shows of a man constructing artificial intelligence and constructing artificial intelligence. This picture represents some of the scholars that goes into this theory. As you can see, we just mentioned Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, but Dr. Amos Wilson is another huge part of this theory, as well as Dr. Ben Jochanan and others. This graphic, what you see right here, actually represents what you might call a preview of the LLM that I'm hoping to create. Because this won't be a very, very extremely technical presentation because the proposal still exists in what you might say is a conceptual phase. But we have a newsletter, which is called Dismantled. It's an AI powered newsletter where I've combined the works of these scholars and synthesized their works through the artificial voice of Malcolm X. And in this way, um, we want to democratize, we want to take advantage of AI's um, promise in democratizing knowledge. And so that this knowledge from the greatest counter-racist scholars ever is available to people who want to understand and study this information. We don't want to force this information on anyone, as opposed to anti-racism and telling white people that they have to not, they shouldn't be racist or force them not to be racist. We think that is a very bad idea uh, as far as the scholars of this. And we think that that contributes to the growing problem that we see worldwide right now with racism and white supremacy. So let's talk about some of those current events as far as how they relate to AI. Last year, President Joe Biden, issued what was heralded as the most robust set of directives any government worldwide has ever implemented regarding AI safety, security, and trust. And within that order, he had a section advancing equity and civil rights. So that let me know that that was an important theme of artificial intelligence as we see the rise of LLMs, ChatGPT, Anthropic, different ones, that there is a concern that it is producing information that is biased and that could be discriminatory. And further confirmation of that was we seen when Mr. Putin had some very negative comments about the rise in the AI from the West, and he said that those models ignored or even counseled Russian language and culture. And then that further got me to thinking to myself, well, if Mr. Putin is concerned about biases and from the West, then as a African American or Black person, a person of color, then I'm concerned about the biases that exist within the LLMs as well. And this demonstrated a need to me for a LLM that was trained from an African centered perspective, as we're talking about in this presentation. So this is a graphic of the planetary chess system. Engineered this system about 2 years ago. And the research that I've done that I'm presenting today, it falls into the knowledge portion of this system, where we try to put the best knowledge by the best scholars, as you've seen earlier, the scholars that was mentioned earlier, people who have dedicated their lives to the study of white supremacy and racism. And we want to put that knowledge together so that we can utilize it. And along with the artwork that you've seen, again, it's called Supremacy. And so the next phase in this system is to create a chess game where we can kind of model this scenario of systemic racism and learning how to overcome it through knowledge. And if you look here at the bottom, here you'll actually see Smoky's place in this system. And if you're familiar with some of the new movements going on in the open source community, Recently, there was a open source tool called Chat Dev, and what Chat Dev was able to do was use multiple agents to be able to represent a software company. And so by using Chat Dev, you will be able to input a line, and I've been working on it, but I haven't been able, my computer science skills are a little suspect. My background is actually in electrical engineering. And so I've been struggling with trying to operate some of these new platforms. But just as the agents collaborate in tasks like those in Chat Dev, this open source tool, the agents for the planetary chess system will operate collectively to monitor specific tags such as racism, white supremacy, systemic racism, anti-racism, and the great replacement theory across various news sources. These agents will function as vigilant observers, systematically analyzing news stories through the lenses of esteemed scholars such as Dr. Amos Wilson and Dr. Francis Cress Wilson. They will extract wisdom and insights from the scholarly perspectives to formulate strategic responses aimed at countering racist narratives and strategies. So this is from another paper that I've recently written, but you can see a good framework of the planetary chess system. But Smoky within this system will play a crucial role in monitoring societal dynamics related to systemic racism by systematically analyzing real world events, news articles, social media discussions, and other relevant sources to provide insights into racial dynamics and system injustices. We want to take advantage of AI's, again, data prowess capabilities and sift through large amounts of data to identify patterns, trends, and underlying narratives concerning white supremacy and systemic racism. And this will provide us with a knowledge so that we can prepare ourselves for any threats or anything that we can be better prepared as the climate is deteriorating in some parts of the world, especially here with the rise of and the MAGA, as far as the MAGA crowd and Mr. Trump. Here's another graphic showing an important part of Smoky in this system of planetary chess. And as far as analyzing and going through information and data, and then feeding this data back into the knowledge basis that we have, and then being able to come up with strategic ways that we can challenge white supremacy and understanding it, and for everybody, but people who want to understand it, but mainly we want to focus on bringing this knowledge to people who are the victims of white supremacy. We don't want to force this knowledge upon anyone, just the people who feel like it's applicable for their lives. So let's get into the discussion and tackling some complex issues. As everyone knows, systemic racism is a very complex issue, a delicate issue. And if there was a literary review for my paper, Dr. Ruha Benjamin, her book, Race After Technology, would be subject for the literary review. She's a sociologist and Alexander Stewart 1886 professor of African American Studies at Princeton University. Her research delves into the social dimensions of science, medicine, and technology, illuminating how these advancements can perpetuate or dismantle social inequalities, particularly those related to race. Dr. Benjamin is a recognized expert on algorithmic bias and its impact on marginalized communities. Her book, Race After Technology, abolitionist tools for the new Jim Code, critiques the inherent biases in AI systems, and proposes strategies for fostering a more equitable technological landscape. She is a leading voice advocating for the development of what I call counter-racist technologies that actively challenge systemic racism. And so some of the things from her book, as well as some of the other books that was referenced in the paper, the key points are that LLMs are inherently biased. And in certain cases that I've witnessed, they are engineered to avoid addressing inquiries related to racism or really tough problems due to embedded constraints, shaped by what is commonly referred to as white fragility within the ethical parameters guiding their development. So if you get to having some real tough conversations about racism, a lot of times, Anthropic especially, where they say, well, I'm not comfortable talking about that. And they kind of steer the conversation in another way that's not necessarily beneficial in solving the problem. Let's say that. Another point from the book, from that book that's referenced in the paper, Unmasking AI, Joy Balamwini, in her book, she aptly states that you may hear the term black box used to describe AI systems because there are unexplainable components involved. While it is true that parts of the process evade exact explanations, we still have to make sure we closely examine the AI systems being developed. Access to the training data is crucial when we want to have a deeper understanding of the risk posed by the AI system. Unless we know where the data comes from, who collected it, and how it is organized, we cannot know if ethical processes were used. So one of the main points in understanding LLMs is that they're only good as the information they're trained on, or how they're trained, the data sets that they're trained on. And as the author also states, in my work, I use the coded gaze term as a reminder that the machines we build reflect the priorities, preferences, and even prejudices of those who have the power to shape technology. And so again, we have to always remember that these LLMs are inherently shaped by the corpus of data that they are trained on. And this systemic bias presents what Dr. Benjamin calls a new Jim Crow, a new type of discrimination that sometimes slips beneath our radar. We've seen a reverse, what we might say a reverse case of that a few months ago when Google produced some images of Black people who were white. In reality, it was what Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, and there was a big fall off from that, and what we might call, I don't know, a reverse case of systemic bias. But yeah, so again, we want to make the point again in tackling this complex issue that that counter racism, understanding racism is better than anti-racism at this point, which is basically kind of forcing people to this position. And again, I've stated before, I think that is not a good idea in this terms of racial climates. And this is a picture that reinforces what I just said. This picture came from the trial the other day of former President Trump. And we've seen other instances of this from Steve Bannon, where they say victory or death, if Trump or death. So this is, again, this picture is used to show the climate that we're in and the importance of bringing this type of knowledge to the world and making this knowledge available to the world. Because as once was said, knowledge unfits a man to be a slave. So we can expand upon that, and we could say that by teaching this knowledge on a vast level, it makes systemic racism a thing. We can dismantle it by teaching the knowledge of it. And again, I believe that there exists a very huge need to monitor the MAGA crowd, the Great Replacement theory, and the far right. And we want to take advantage of AI's technological tools and prowess to be able to do that. So, as another quote or reference from the book, as Marcus and Davis aptly stated, when push comes to shove, AI researchers want to solve complex problems. They often use hybrid systems, and we expect this to become more and more the case. And that's what's going on here. We utilize AI. This is what I believe is one of the, I may be biased, of course, but one of the more exciting forms of social tech or ed tech. As I get to the conclusion of this paper, I want to leave you with a quote from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She says that the most critical factor in that change of circumstances will be non-white people's ever-increasing understanding of the behavioral phenomena of white supremacy as a global terroristic power system. And so we want to give the knowledge to people to be able to play this global chess game that we see occurring all throughout the world. This last slide, again, is a picture of what we call racialism, but it includes the formula. This is the formula for ending systemic racism, which comes from Sun Tzu, who also leaves us with another very important tenet of the planetary chess system, is that the supreme art of warfare is to defeat an enemy without fighting. And that comes from a supreme position of knowledge. So if we can put this knowledge in the hands of marginalized peoples all across the world, then we can be one step ahead of racism and white supremacy. So thank you for hearing me. If anybody have any questions.